In today's video, I'm going to be speaking to you about the role of the Data Protection Officer, or the DPO as it's more commonly known. Now, the first thing that your school needs to consider is whether in fact it is required to appoint a DPO under the GDPR. Now, for most public authorities, there's a legal requirement to have one. So if you're a public school, such as a maintained school, an academy or free school, then you need to appoint a DPO. And if you haven't done that by now, then you need to make sure that that's at the top of your to-do list. Now, assuming that you require one, you then need to go on to consider who might be suitable to carry out that role. Now, in this regard, the GDPR is helpful because it's fairly prescriptive about the professional qualities that your DPO must possess. And at the top of that list is expertise. So your data protection officer needs to be somebody who is an expert in data protection law and practice. If they're not going to meet the GDPR standard. Secondly, your DPO must be independent. And this is one of the reasons why it's more difficult to appoint a DPO internally. So for most schools, they're not going to have somebody who is an expert in data protection law and procedure. But even if they do, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to deal with this issue, which is independence. And that's because the role is likely to be undertaken by somebody in a senior position, such as the head teacher, who will be a member of the senior leadership team, and they will not have the necessary degree of independence which a data protection officer must possess. And it's for this reason that the DPO role is often outsourced. In terms of what the actual DPO does, it's helpful to start with an analogy. So if you think about the role of the designated safeguarding lead for just a moment, or the DSL, as I'm sure that you refer to it as. The DSL is the point of contact in the school that is an expert in safeguarding. They will make sure that the school complies with its overarching safeguarding procedures. So that will include making sure that the school actually has those procedures, that suitable training is provided to deal with safeguarding incidents and to work with other agencies in terms of child protection. The data protection officer role is fairly similar, but just for data protection. So the first thing that the data protection officer must do is to monitor compliance with the regulation. So that can include things that the DSL might do, such as making sure that the school has the correct policies and procedures in place. So for example, a data protection policy or data breach procedures, that the school carries out and receives advice from the DPO on data protection impact assessments, that staff receive data protection training, and that the school carries out audits as required to comply with the GDPR. Another aspect of the role, similar to the DSL, is advisory. So the DPO will be the person in the school, again with the expert level knowledge, who is able to advise employees and other individuals in the school about any issues that arise in relation to data protection. And that's another reason why it's important for your DPO to be an expert in data protection law. Your DPO will also be the contact with the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. And that will likely arise perhaps where the ICO has received a complaint, maybe from a parent or from a member of staff or even a pupil. And it's likely to be in regard to some type of failure that they perceive in relation to how the school has dealt with a data protection issue. In that circumstance, the DPO will be the contact point for the ICO. It could also be in a situation where there's a security incident, such as a data breach, and the ICO are investigating. In that sense, when that happens, that the ICO will expect that the DPO be the point of contact in the school. The DPO is also required to report to the highest level within the school. So it will report to the governing body and the senior leadership team. So there's a really important relationship there between the senior level within the school and the data protection officer, because the senior leadership team are going to want to ensure that there is a strong data protection culture within the school. And in order to do that, it needs to understand what has to be done to comply with the regulation. And that's why it requires the expertise of the data protection officer to understand how it's complying with the regulation so that it can make sure that on a practical level that it's providing a strong data protection culture. And that's why there's such an important role for the data protection officer to play in a strong data protection culture in your school.